All right, Al, we had a closer look story that we wanted to take a glance at because it could involve a big, massive cybersecurity incident in the making. Now, we all probably know the name of New York Attorney General Letitia James, but she's filed a lawsuit against Zelle's parent company, which is known as Early Warning Services. That doesn't sound ominous at all. She's accusing it of failing to protect customers from widespread fraud that cost victims over $1 billion, billion with a B, between 2017 and 2023. The suit claims that early warning systems ignored known vulnerabilities and failed to enforce anti-fraud rules on its partner banks. Experts say that the case raises major questions about the responsibilities of real-time payment platforms, as well as highlighting the need for stronger security, identity verification, and frankly, consumer education. A victory for New York could result in everyone's favorite fines and possibly some mandated reforms. But the bigger question is whether or not consumers will see meaningful change or restitution from all of this fraud. Now, Al, I don't know if Zelle is a huge payment platform down under, but I'm sure you guys have payment processors that you like to use down there in this instant back and forth. Are you seeing a lot of fraud or potential problems with that?
So payment fraud for particularly instant payments is absolutely a thing. We have regular television ads here from a couple of our major banks talking about being aware of fraudulent activity, people trying to do social engineering, because these attacks are generally social engineering attacks to get you to give them enough information that they can then institute a transfer out of your account. Absolutely, that is a routine piece of education. The banking industry in New Zealand works a little bit differently to the United States. We are, for a start, a much smaller country, and so it's much easier for us to have a central clearing place, and we've had that for a while in a way that the US doesn't seem to have. So Zelle seems to be very widely used in the US to transfer money between individuals or between individuals and organizations, and uh, clearly a place that is ripe as a target for fraud. In the same way any other instant payment platform is. We saw fraud going back, PayPal fraud going back 10, 15 years. And so this is nothing new that the fraud is going on. The challenge, of course, is that we have more of those mobile devices that can be engineered on, more of the capabilities to be constantly connected and therefore constantly at risk, and also increased use of these instant payments because people just don't send checks in the post the way that they did back when I had hair on the top. Uh, Times have changed. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting test case for who has what level of responsibility in the path through these payments. Whether there is a requirement for due diligence on the part of Zelle and their partners to make sure that this isn't a fraudulent transaction, rather than leaving the penalty entirely on the consumer at the end. I know there tends to be legislation around this. I know there is in New Zealand around if the individual customer has behaved in good faith and sensibly, they're usually found to be the ones who should carry the loss rather than the transfer company. But if the transfer company has not acted in good faith with due diligence, then they should have some responsibility. Tom, do you use a lot of transfer systems in your life? Do you have multiple of these things set up on your phone?
I have them set up because I kind of have to for certain things, but I actually don't use them very much at all. Like I went to buy something the other day that the person selling it was like, "Oh, well, you can just Cash App me the money," and I actually had to dig out my password because I never log into Cash App. People are like, "Oh, well, why don't you Venmo me this or why don't you do that?" You notice that these are all brands, right? Cash App, Venmo, PayPal Money, Apple Pay, whatever. You know who wasn't getting a bite out of that apple? The banks. And that's why Zelle exists, folks. Zelle is the bank industry trying to get in on the micropayment, peer-to-peer payment system. Because like you said, nobody sends checks anymore. The holy grail is to be able to tap your phone together and transfer that money back and forth. There's very little like physical money transfer happening anymore. Like I just finished working a football game here in Norman, Oklahoma, and the entire stadium is cashless. They will not take cash. If you show up with it, like if you have cash in your pocket, you have to go to a machine and transfer that cash into like a debit card or some kind of payment card and then use it. So why was Zelle so particularly egregious here? One of the things that makes people pick one payment processor over the other is friction. Lower friction means a little more likely to pick that one. PayPal for the longest time was the lowest friction option because everybody had a PayPal account. And then Zelle came along. I'm sorry, not Zelle. Venmo came along, and Venmo reduced friction as well. My wife takes payments for her tutoring through Venmo, and Venmo sent her a debit card. It's like you don't even have to transfer money back and forth; just pay directly with your card. And it's driving the banks nuts because not only do they not get any of that money, it's not stored in their bank system, which means they can't loan it out and can't earn interest on it, but they don't get the transaction fees because it's the other part of it is all those transaction fees are avoiding the banking system. So they created Zelle and they made it as low friction as possible. How low friction? Basically, you had a Zelle account, whether you realized it or not. If you were working for one of the major partners of Zelle, they had already pre-provisioned you a Zelle account or enabled it. So all you had to do was call in and do that. And this is the fraud that Letitia James is talking about because it did not take any verification system or minimal verification at all for me to call a bank with an account number and some kind of identifying information and set up a Zelle account. And then it goes to the app, and then I redirect that to a different account somewhere. And then I start using your legitimate bank account and Zelle information to transfer money all over the place. And not only is it invisible, you may not even know you have a Zelle account, but then nobody can trace it. And so when the fraud comes back, it comes back to my bank account because that's where it was attached to. And now I'm fighting charges that I didn't even know I had. And that's the problem. If you create a low friction environment with no checks and balances, then what ultimately ends up happening is that people are going to defraud it because I don't know if you know this or not about human beings, Alistair, but they're always looking for a shortcut, especially if it means I can get rich from it. And so that's the problem that people are dealing with is they found the get rich quick scheme and they're going to ride this sucker into the sunset. And so what ends up happening is that people like me are left out in the cold. And by the way, I did check. I had no intention of using Zelle ever, but I still checked to make sure that my bank account had a Zelle whatever so that I could set it up, set up my passwords and everything, and then shut it off. It didn't because my bank is a credit union and it wasn't participating in Zelle, which made me feel a little bit better. But I can also tell you that scammers are looking for Zelle. They prefer to use Zelle because the same kinds of transaction protections that places like PayPal and Venmo use don't exist in Zelle because it's effectively almost like a wire transfer. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so at least with Venmo or PayPal, if they detect that it's a fraudulent transaction, they can claw that money back. Zelle really can't. And so I hope that this at least is a win for the New York Attorney General, because one of the things that we found over the years is that when things happen in New York, because so much business goes through New York, they almost invariably have to change the way that they do things in order to make sure that they're able to do business in the state of New York. And then we just get all the benefits of that.